couple of years ago.
Good morning, everyone. I'll call the Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting to order on this day of April 8th at 8:30 a.m. We begin our meeting with a pledge. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda? What I mean. Then I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Support.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. At this time, we have a public comment period, and we invite citizens to come before us. Are there anybody in the audience who would like to have 5 minutes?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I'd like to start today by talking about the hiring process for the county administrator. It was refreshing to see you guys follow through and encourage everyone to be a part of that process, the staff and the public. With the next process coming up very soon, I think we are all looking forward to being a part of that again, being included, and have our insights valued. So, thank you. I would like you to consider adding the item called public comment to the published minutes. The fact that there is input is encouraging for others to even consider doing the same. Names and subject are not necessarily the issue, but the fact that there is input and that there are responses, I think, is very valuable for the rest of the community to know. Now, how does the county publicize its information about events and meetings? There is a significant population that uses the Cook County News Herald as its information resource. The reliance by the county on only technology, computers, smartphones, Facebook, Boreal, deprives many households of this public information and thus participation. I don't know why we would assume that computers and smartphones are in every household. Cost is one consideration. If electronics exist, do you know that the public is literate in their use? It's called digital literacy skills, and it's actually measured by those in the education field. And then there's the issue of connectivity. So there are really 3 reasons for you to think about another way of getting information out, and that's cost, the digital skills, and the connections. How do you reach the far corners of your county? We have a newspaper with circulation around 3,000. So here you have a resource that can reach more households if you give it the opportunity. Small town newspapers need to be supported. All avenues of communication need to be utilized for the good of your people. Please consider adding county board information to the calendar of events and do what you've said you always wanted to do, and that is to keep your public aware of what government is and inviting citizen input. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come forward? Has anyone on the board received any comments they would need to read to us?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a comment from Don Davison, 583 South Shore Drive. What the hell are you doing to county taxpayers? We have retired. Our income is fixed, but your entire board doesn't seem to give a care about your incredible increase in taxes. Look at our property. You gave it nearly $100,000 increase in value when we haven't done an improvement in 30 years. And not one county employee has set foot on our property for at least 10 years. And our property taxes increased by nearly 30%. I'm disabled, I can hardly walk some days, and I cannot attend board meetings. You and the entire county board are purposely trying to destroy our way of life, and for that you should be ashamed. Please make this public comment at your next meeting. And then I have another one from Mr. Davison as well. I don't know who came up with the idea, but getting Rena back in the mix is the best choice in your commissioner tenure. You can choose or not to identify me in your public comments. God bless that Rena has consented.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you on that. We'll move on to the consent agenda, which has claims, minutes of our regular meeting, Gunflint Lake Raffle permit application, approve the hire of Andrea Parent-Smith as custodian, hire Abigail Prom as environmental technician, approve the hire of Merrisa Chapman as adult and home community-based service supervisor. Does anybody want to pull anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pull item B, please. E.
B?
E.
Oh, E, okay. Okay. Let's put that then toward the end, maybe under Human Resources as item B,
Okay.
and that'll be item E, but B under that. A, B, C, D, okay. Anything else? Then a motion to approve as whole, as amended.
Madam Chair, oh, go ahead.
So moved.
Support?
All in favor?
All right.
Opposed, same sign, motion passes. Item number 4, we'll move into emergency management with Mike Keyport, a request from the Lutsen Township Emergency Shelter.
This is called arriving on time, isn't it? Whoa.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, community members. I have with me today Sharon Hexam Platzer representing Lutsen Township today. A little history about the document in front of you. What I nicknamed the Christmas. The Christmas blizzard of 2022.
The Christmas gift blizzard.
Yeah.
Blizzard.
Was an extended power outage blizzard, not well travel for almost 4 days in a row over the Christmas weekend. It affected the whole county, but in Lutsen's case, they as a township decided that, being how they already have a very nice town hall, that they would like to make improvements to that to make it at least a warming house and an emergency shelter should be needed. So they did the proper thing. They put together a nice proposal as to get generators in there, cots and other things they would need to have that building more accessible should we have an extended power outage down that way again. So what I did from my end, they reached out to me, and I think I spoke to the board before about this. We do have a hazard mitigation plan. If anything within that plan is affected in our county, there is funding available. Now, since that happened, we had to start updating our hazard mitigation plan. Backing up, shelters are designated in our plan, so that would be a something this money could be used for. Now, having said that, Since then, our plan is in the middle of being updated. We cannot access any of those funds until our plan is updated, approved by the state, and approved by FEMA. That likely will not happen until, I'm guessing, November of this year, hopefully by year's end. So I did submit what's called a notice of interest. So we're in the queue for this funding when the plan is approved. Now having said all that, just yesterday I got an email from FEMA saying that this funding is in jeopardy of being cut by FEMA. They've already cut it up to 2023, and they're looking at years ahead. So any projects that were in the queue from 20 to 2023 that did not get finished, that money has to go back to FEMA, believe it or not. So, and they're looking ahead. So it shouldn't affect, we are using this same money to update our hazard mitigation plan. So it's kind of a big deal in my world. But that it shouldn't affect the continuation of getting our plan updated, and then hopefully this funding will be available. So that's where I'm at from a funding standpoint from my office. So we're kind of on the back burner for Lutsen Township. So I'll let Sharon speak for the township.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing the job you do. I know it's not always easy. And I know that from my understanding, when our supervisor, Lolly Cooper, came 3 years ago, that she got verbal support from, and I see nods of heads, at that time. And then when we decided to, wait for a grant to be written, things happen with grants, I understand that. So instead, I also decided to see what else. So our former fire chief worked at the North Shore Health and Hospital and got cots delivered free. So we have those. So our cost is going down. We got $7,000 from Tofty because they will not make the whole school into an emergency shelter because the generator for that size building would be spendy. And we have set aside some of our ARPA fund money. In other words, it probably would have bought the propane tank and poured the slab had the weather agreed with us. In other words, we're moving forward. What we would like from you is some support. And in that vein, I will tell you that I did download the mitigation plan, current mitigation plan, and in there is 4.2 vulnerability assessment. County departments and jurisdictions were invited to respond to the questionnaire. So it's in there, and it talks about the different plan updates that are needed, and fire-wise. So we're not talking just about the power going out, because we also know about possible fire. We're just in a county of woods, right? Forests. In the second part, 4.2.1, the asset inventory listed the fire stations and specifically named fire stations. And yes, Lutsen Town Hall and Lutsen Fire Department were mentioned, but not as a short-term, that's a key word there, short-term emergency shelter. Putting in the generator would then allow that facility to run on propane for as long as needed, okay? Well, I decided perhaps you would like to see that there are other people who think that way. These are all pages of signed petition that says, I, as a Lutsen, Tofty, or Schroeder resident, wish you to move forward on providing support for the Lutsen Town Hall to be used as a short-term emergency shelter. We have a kitchen, we have bathrooms, we have shower facilities. Please understand that this would provide a place for people to stay if storms or fires impact their home for a short stay until they can secure other housing. A nominal amount of support would help the Lutsen Township in this endeavor. In speaking with one of our residents who works for public health here, she said, well, there is an emergency shelter accommodations at the community center. That's a little hard for people up the Kramer Road to get there. I even heard, well, but what if it's snowing and they can't get out? I said, I know a fire department that'll get you, regardless. And that's because there is a particular device attached to a snowmobile that can go in and take people out securely. So I'm guessing that I have as many as, I didn't count, sorry, because they keep coming in. Over 200 signatures from the West End folks. One way that I received some of these was through the Tate Lake Association and through Caribou Lake Association. They sent me emails saying we support. But there is one particular one, if you don't mind my reading it. The location of the town hall allows property owners to stay in the area while determining their next steps. From the town hall, property owners could have access to public announcements about the emergency, as well as access to internet, allowing communication with concerned relatives or neighbors. The structure itself is a safe environment, large enough to temporarily house numerous people. It has restrooms and a small kitchen area for food prep. It's close to the dog park. As such, displaced pet owners could utilize the area for any four-legged animal family members, In addition, that location is close to emergency services, and perhaps, if needed, search and rescue could provide triage for injured people. There are people here that really want to have this done, and we can't wait. Especially Mike's news now makes me a little nervous. In that aspect of financial support, one of our members contacted Arrowhead Electric about Roundup funds, but it's not the time for Roundup. But they donated another $1,000 toward this endeavor. I know what we provided you 3 years ago was a cost of about $27,000. That was 3 years ago. And you know what that means. Things could go up just a little bit. I'm thinking particularly the wiring and the tubing for the generator to be connected to the current town. We have a firefighter who is an electrician and another former firefighter, he just retired, who does plumbing work, and they both are willing to work on it, which brings prices down because they too want to protect the community. So with that, I was hoping that our chairperson, Carl Friesner, was here because he would present to you the cost of that generator. He found that out with the electrician and the plumber just recently. So beyond that, do you have questions for me?
Thank you for the presentation. We've been working on this for a long time. Since we had the power outage of 29 hours, I went before the township and started talking about some type of a shelter. Not only for the citizens, but for folks who are visiting in the area to know that their electricity is off at their motel and condo, and they would have a safe place to go. So it really is far-reaching. And things happen over the years. And Mike's news this morning was not encouraging, but I think we should move forward and talk about some possibilities. So I'll open it up for any questions to Mike or to Sharon. Commissioner White?
A question I have, because this really got me to thinking about it. And I do recollect, I was here for the mattress part, so
Yes.
that was 2 years ago, something. Yeah. What about, and what do they have up the Gunflint Trail? Do they have a shelter up the trail? And then I don't know what there is in the East End. I mean, I know there's.
I don't know, excuse me.
No, I wouldn't expect that you would.
I don't know about the East End, but I have been to the town hall fire area up the Gunflint. And I know that they have the facilities there for a short-term stay. I don't know about cots
And
up for them.
some of the cots that you got from North Shore Health, Gunflint Trail also has I don't know how many, a dozen or so cots up the trail. East End Grand Portage has their community center, which in my opinion is probably one of the best shelters that I know of in the whole region. It has everything. So
Wait, did you build that?
I didn't. I didn't.
I like that question.
And to that question, to that statement, Grand Portage is a sovereign nation. And so I would make no assumption, and very hospitable and everything, but that would be for the Grand Portage community. And I do know that they have welcomed the other community, other people beyond the Grand Portage to come and use that facility.
Sure.
But I would never assume that it would be an emergency. This is more than that. So it goes to the question, should there be some efforts made to create, which would be much harder, to create a shelter in Hovland or Colville Town Hall? Now, neither one has water, but that's just a question. I mean, is it, I'm not disputing the value of this at all, but should we have another one on the east end of the county? Consider developing something on the east end.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, the information. To your point, Commissioner White, if we do something on the west end, then in effect it sets a precedent. It's the same way of taking over road responsibilities in areas, that we have to look at it in the context of what would this decision say that makes us accountable for others that have similar, situations. So I think identifying, what we do have up the trail and what we have on the east end, if there is a relationship, and Mike certainly would understand that in his position there before, that is an understood respectful agreement, then we might be able to do that. An assessment overall, I think, is good, and it's healthy to understand if in fact what we are providing is meeting present day needs. So that's a consideration. The bigger picture consideration in the context of setting precedent or an evaluation of the county overall, if I were sitting in your position in Lutsen, I would not want to delay a response to our present need. So while there's respect for the bigger context, which we must be aware of, there's also the realization that you've been working on this, and this is something that we want to address. The next question is, and what you were talking about, Mike, is the funding source. And if our funding source is tied up in a requirement for compliance in order to have those funds released, it's looking, as we often do, at funding sources that we typically attempt to use in funding some of these things that come before the board. And so if we find resourcefulness on Lutsen and its citizens in trying to come up with some of this money, partnering with our other agencies or entities, those are good things. The money that is the money that you're referring to, Mike, that is state funding, or is that federal?
It's federal funding that comes through the state, yes.
Okay, and is the ARPA funds, which are the American Rescue Act, federal funding? Is that what you're referring to? Is that separate?
I am not. This is hazard mitigation.
Okay. And so I guess the question to Brady is, do we have monies that have come through ARPA, the American Rescue Act, federal funding?
Yeah, we have, most of it's been allocated, but there's a little bit left out of the one allocation.
Okay. And so what I would say is looking at funding as it exists in that fund, which I'm assuming is, relates to this.
Yeah, the one that's unallocated, because we got two sources, it has no restrictions. We have used it for fund balance, for levy reduction, bond payments. It's gone housing, it's gone many places. Some of the preparations for some of our building projects, pre-bonding costs and things like that. So it's had many uses.
Okay, thank you. So, I guess if we look all at, if there's grant writing that we've done where we've benefited considerably, if that's been something that's been looked at, and I apologize coming into this, midstream, I don't know what has been done. I just know that there's an informed, intentional process that's involved the community and certainly as representatives of the community and certainly Commissioner Starley in her position on the west end there, that if we can find funding sources that do not tap into our general fund in the levy, that I think is what we want to work at to understand how can we do this without it becoming a tax burden. And if we can be creative and resourceful in that regard, if there are, in some cases, purchases that are made that are done through the auspices of our maintenance department or anything else that reduces cost, if that's explored, anything that we can do to reduce cost and find sources of money to be able to respond, that would be my recommendation, and certainly would support it with the understanding that in the bigger picture, it would be good to look at providing this throughout the county so that we have that need met. And understanding that if in doing this we set precedent, then we have to evaluate on the same criteria anybody else that comes before us. So I guess that would be my position. The other question I would have is that when our lived experience defines for us our reality, then we respond by we need to do something because of the occurrence. So if you look at the incidences historically, we can have one big one that we learn a lot from and we respond to that. We can have multiple, so that for the public as a whole, we're looking at the warrant for this being provided. In other words, the identified need and the overall umbrella of governance is to protect its people. And so we have that obligation. It's just how can we do this without adding burden to financial cost?
I appreciate that, Commissioner Gamble. I'd like to introduce our Lutsen Township Chairperson, Carl Friesner. Carl, do you have some information for them?
I missed the first few minutes of this,
yeah.
so I don't know what you went over.
Everything.
Okay, well then I will leave it in the trusting arms of Sharon for all of that. Thanks for seeing us. I appreciate the time.
Yes. Do we have an idea for the size of the generator?
Yeah.
Estimated cost
Estimated, yes,
would be helpful, I think.
That's what I asked.
So it was less expensive 2 years ago, obviously. Currently, the generator that would be needed would be, right now it's $6,769 for the generator to feed the supply of the town hall. And that's, from what my electricians have told me, that'll cover the needs.
Carl, would that cover the installation too and the labor?
No, that's just the apparatus.
So then the labor,
Right,
the
the
labor
installation cost at least 3 years ago from one of our former firefighters was $15,000. And I don't know if that included the connections, not the generator, the pieces parts. I'm sorry that's so technical.
Yeah, that included in 2023 the installing of 3 propane heaters, the running of the gas lines inside the building and to the generator was $15,000.
Right.
Correct.
So even if that's up a ways, it's not up lots.
Right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. In looking at generator, was there any consideration given for finding something that's in good condition that might be used on the market? And certainly,
in today's marketplace, there are a lot of people that are buying up good used generators, but I'm just saying if that's something that's looked at, usually the argument is if you buy something used, unless you know its history, you might be asking for problems, but it is part of the stewardship of just looking at options and seeing what's there.
Sure.
You have in your presentation right now a request, a financial number. That number is?
You're right. There, because I didn't know that, but I would say with that cost and the possible cost of the installation being up a little bit to be maybe 8,500.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking overall.
Yes,
That's from-
because we have raised other money
Yeah.
toward this.
Correct.
or
And what
saved
do we
other
have in
money
that
toward it.
fund, Brady?
About 150,000.
Okay.
So 8,500 kind of fits in there and just a little squeak.
Yeah. Yeah, every little squeak is,
I know.
yeah, which is not to minimize, the
Right.
request. I feel that when entities, whomever they might be, show their resourcefulness and they're willing to work hard for what they want, as opposed to just simply coming and asking for money, that speaks volumes to us as decision makers to show that your stewardship is backed up by your efforts, and so I certainly appreciate that, so. And you're looking for a motion of
Yes,
support?
and a check as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay.
I would like to refute the used generator idea. If they have got an electrician, and obviously, I mean, it sounds like they're getting this at cost, I would go with your electrician who's supplying, who's doing this for the community, because you never know. I recollect years ago borrowing an air compressor to work on the first hockey rink, and it died. It died, and so we were responsible for replacing this air compressor, which wasn't worth it to start with. But anyway, I believe the investment in new equipment for a long-term facility like this for the community, if it's 1,000, 3,000, whatever it is, and then it would have the warranty of the company and of the installer, it would be well worth it for peace of mind and reliability.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, before the board right now is looking at funding sources. If the figure that is being presented to us, the request, the ask, is a certain amount of money, and you're comfortable with that and its current figures, and you would move forward with that with locked-in agreements, then what Mike is talking about, money in the mitigation plan, we have to comply with that, which is November, in order for those monies to come up. If those monies with compliance built into that would be funding for this?
Unfortunately, it's not a reimbursement type thing. It's
Okay.
got to be a moving forward type thing.
Okay.
So I couldn't do that. I do have another project in the queue with the city. So we will be having the same conversation with the city.
Sure.
But
Yeah, and that's sort of where I was going to see if those monies were designated in that, but knowing that we have multiple needs, obviously, if we can tap monies that are designated for things like this from those funding sources without it becoming part of the levy, then that's a good thing. So then it comes back to, if we've looked at our resources and that's not something that could reimburse funds that we take from this fund, then we're looking at this point in time, taking from this fund. So it's from the fund
Unfortunately,
that we have right
From the
now.
ARPA fund.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so it's whether the board would agree to move forward and tap those funds. Are there other things that we talked about relative to those funds? Other than that they're not designated and they're subjective?
They're not designated, but the consideration is always for levy reduction.
Yeah.
Other than that, so.
Well, that would sort of be robbing Peter to pay Paul in this situation, if what we're trying to do is mitigate impact on levy. And if we take monies that impact levy to pay it just,
Yeah.
like I say, it's just numbers on paper then.
Yeah, we have the money now, so, and it's available for any use. So in effect, you could say it's like fund balance
Yeah.
in our case. Yeah.
Do we have any other sources of revenue that are laying around?
Like, like this? We do have some funds. I have to look it up to remember the language. It's been a while. But it would take some analysis as to the use.
So I'll let Brady go ahead and kind of tweak on that and look and see what there would be available. So the understanding is, Mike, that probably there will not be money available. You won't know till November.
You know, I hate to make light of it, but I think you have to in the world we're in today, that somebody described it as doing the hokey pokey. Sometimes it's in and then sometimes it's out. And so we just really don't know what this is going to look like until things just keep moving forward here. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I just do
But
not.
it's an honest answer.
It's my best answer, and either way, this funding won't be available till almost year's end.
So what I was wondering is, if the township would do the 8,500, would it be easier to reimburse them, or? to-
We can't reimburse with
so-
this program. It has
Okay.
to be a project in the queue
In the queue?
yeah, it's not a reimbursable type thing,
Okay.
unfortunately.
No other way to go at this?
Right. FEMA money doesn't work that way. ARPA money that you have
Yeah.
could help us
Could.
for 8,500. That'd be wonderful.
Okay, all righty. Well, any further comments or questions?
Just
you
one
find-
little, how many people could shelter in that space? Like, because the population swells at different times.
It
And I'm
does.
thinking like cold, in the wintertime.
Right.
And I would imagine they've got generators up on the hill too to help in the event of a weather emergency. So,
I don't know that they have one running their fire hall and town hall up there, however.
oh no, I'm talking about the hill, not the Gunflint Trail. I'm talking about up at the ski hill. So if people on the west end get stranded for some reason, it's just a question, not, how
Yeah.
many people would fit in the town hall?
Thank you for that. I will tell you that last June, there was a severe thunder and rain, and there was a group of scouts with their adult supervisors going to stay up the Sawbill. Not so. They came to the town hall, and there were, we were there when they came in to shelter for the night. And there were 25?
Yep, 25.
25. That was without crowding at all, so
It was just a curiosity
I know.
question.
It can seat 200. I don't think it could sleep 200, however.
Right, and the American Red Cross does have a designation as to square foot for each individual,
Right.
so.
And we did have the
It
Red
would-
Cross, oh, sorry.
It would hold quite a few, more than you would imagine.
And the Red Cross did go through with our supervisor, and it's not a designated Red Cross, it is a designated short-term shelter, different use completely.
And historically, in our county, we have opened shelters over the years since, in my 14 years that I've been here, in town here in Grand Portage. They typically turn out to be more of a warming house, kind of a reunification center, if you will. It's just a place to go to make a plan and have internet and have heat and, possibly stay overnight, but And so we have everything in place to do that, but the biggest thing in my eyes is just to have that place to go that everybody's aware of. This is where you go, the doors will be open, and you can make a plan for yourself how to move forward in a disaster.
In the mid 2012, 13, 14, when I was Township Supervisor, we rebuilt the whole building, the fire hall and that room, thinking back then it would be for weddings and quilting parties and all of that, not realizing that the climate now was changing and that we needed to have a larger facility for that also. So it included a variety of things, not so much the climate back then, so that's why it does hold quite a few people. Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brady, did you?
We have a couple of sources of funds that come from our tax forfeited revenue. That in the past, the titles would not suggest this. Timber development is the statutory title of this funding. And in the past, we used it to start our GIS program years and years ago, related to land. I remember the language was, well, they left it up to us. The DNR used to have to approve these, and then they said, well, you do it, but you follow the statute as close as you can, basically. So we used it for things like that.
In budget discussions previously, if there were pockets of money available that were designated for something, it could be technology, it could be something else, that if we knew we weren't going to use it for the specific language when we set up the fund, we would, in good faith, use those monies for similar expenditures related, and then that used that money with good intention, and it didn't affect levy. So in your opinion, if we were to look at pockets of money that tend to stand latent, but could be related, not tongue-in-cheek, but in good faith, common sense, what would your recommendation be as to where we would take this money?
This is the only one I'm aware of, frankly.
The timber one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we need to put a timber sign above the door or something?
Yeah.
Timber burning, that
Yeah.
works.
We're burning. You may want to get an opinion from our county attorney,
Okay.
because we do get this funding. We may get less in the future because of discussions you've heard about excess revenue from tax forfeit sales.
Yeah.
So this may be the last of its kind.
And is there anything that in the foreseeable future you see these monies being used for, given its restrictions?
Well, GIS, for example, since that was the historical use. But again, I'd like to at least bring it forward with the county attorney before we made a decision on this.
Madam Chair, if the board is in agreement, if we were to get an opinion on that, unless the board chooses to use the monies that are not restricted, that we've used to reduce levy, I would feel more comfortable if we were to get an opinion, we could use these funds and designate them. So I would make a recommendation, we table it, get an opinion from the attorney. If in fact the attorney says it's agreeable, then we could make a motion to support it with the use of those funds, if that would be for our next meeting, if that's not
So
problematic.
2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
Right. So my understanding is you would do the motion then to either take it from the ARPA funds or from
Timber development.
the timber, yes.
If that's a consensus of the
forfeiture.
board.
Madam Chair, I'd be comfortable making a motion, taking it from the timber fund upon approval of the attorney, else the ARPA fund for $8,500. So moved.
Thank you, Dave.
Support.
Any further comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes
And this is 8,500?
unanimously. And I will say
8,500.
that it does open up the fact that we should now look at other areas in the county, and it's going to be a good conversation.
Yes.
about, the safety of everybody, whether it's a wildfire, a blizzard, power outages, whatever the climate is going to be in the future, we need to be prepared for that.
For sure, and to Commissioner White's point, let's get this plan updated and approved by FEMA, and then let's take our time and look at these other possible should that funding be available, that we can
And-
fix.
Commissioner, it just went away. Do we know, I think that the Hovland Town Hall, it's a new one, and would you know if they have any plans for in case of an emergency for people to shelter
In Hovland?
in the Hovland Fire Hall?
Oh, Fire Hall.
Yeah,
I do not know that, but
it's a question.
their office space area would be adequate, likely.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a very good possibility.
Okay, thanks so much.
And I
Thank you.
will leave all the signatures with
Madam
you.
Chair, and if I could just comment, that I appreciate the involvement on the part of the citizens in the community that participated, and oftentimes we have emotional appeals that are not substantiated with the evidence that comes from the people whose lives are affected. So I applaud the efforts and I applaud the participation, and we are here to hear the voice and to make reasonable and good faith decisions, so thank you.
Thank you. I will say that, signatures from the far end of the county, Schroeder Township, all the way into and closer to Grand Marais, because I'd asked before they signed, is it closer for you to go to Grand Marais or come to Lutsen? So from all over, even the unorganized territory. So know that we were trying to make sure that we were talking about all of the West End, not just Lutsen.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll leave it with Andrea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 5, MIS, purchase of replacement VHF paging repeater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today we have before you a request to purchase a single repeater that is one of 9 that makes up the paging system, which is used to call out our volunteer first responders, firefighters, ambulance, EMS, search and rescue throughout the county. These is $6,812. It is a out of budgeted radio capital fund, and it is a replacement for a unit. We have a spare, but the unit has failed, and so this is replacing the spare. So we're not in a down position, but we're using a spare to keep us going. And the kind of additional context with this is over the last several years, since Armor has come forward, the 800 megahertz radio system we've talked a lot about, it's been continued to provide better coverage throughout the county. We looked at several years ago the potential to shift away from this separate system, this VHF system, and rolled out a handful of Armor 800 megahertz pagers, where the idea would be that we wouldn't replace the VHF system anymore, and the Armor would serve as both the radio and the pagers throughout the county. The pagers, excuse me, being smaller and without the antennas and the foresight of the people who preceded the radio communication program here at the county, securing a narrowband exempt VHF frequency license across the county to facilitate that paging, resulted in a system that even with almost double the number of tower sites, the coverage from the VHF side still outperforms the armor site. And so after years of testing with different fire departments using these pagers, as we just recently saw at this board, we got another round of reinvestment for the armor radios. Some fire departments are taking this opportunity to reinvest in their VHF pagers as well. And I bring all that context forward just to say that, you know, we've been in kind of an in-between spot where we're considering as to whether or not we would move away from VHF and go solely with the armor system. But based on those results and the feedback from the different fire departments and first responders, we're going to move forward with maintaining this VHF system into the foreseeable future. And so it's something that we'll be continuing to invest in and budget for. But this is just a normal replacement of a single unit for the quoted price listed in the board packet of $6,812. I'm seeking approval to purchase this per the policy that says over a $5,000 capital purchase comes before the board for approval. But again, it's budgeted funds that are available and just part of the normal process for us. I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Sullivan?
I was going to make a motion that we approve at the rate of $6,812 the necessary replacement parts for the county emergency paging system.
Support?
Any further comments or questions? Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rowan, you mentioned that the armor system and the VHS, they're two different systems, correct? And that we've been using the VHS and then the armor system came along.
Yep.
And so looking forward, if we're investing in something, and you mentioned that the feedback that you got is that we'd like to stay with this if they're comfortable with it. If inevitably it's a program that won't be supported or isn't as efficient as other means, obviously your evaluation or assessment of this is that it warrants it at this point, realizing at some point we might want to just have one system and it'll meet our needs. But if the system it is right now, with all the nuance, says that the VHS is still something we need to keep. So I trust your evaluation, but that evaluation is something, if we respond, see, yeah, but the reality is, this is where we should be going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and I would say, I mean, what facilitated our kind of on hold and rolling out these units to fire departments to test was a change in technology. Several years ago, I think probably 2015, it was actually right after we had been due and allocated funds to replace the equipment of the paging system, just kind of a regular replacement, that we went to a conference and they had 800 megahertz paging. It was something that didn't exist in the field before. And so it was a new technology that came forward and then required us to say, I mean, we need to take a serious look at this because it would eliminate the need to replace VHF systems that supports this throughout the county. And over several years, you know, we rolled them out and we still had more armor sites to build back then, and the coverage was not adequate. We're done building armor sites. The state's been clear about that, and the radio coverage that we get is really good. But currently, the available technology for pagers, it would be a step backwards in coverage for our first responders, and that's not something that we want to do. And so, to your point, I think we'll continue as technology changes. If this improves, we'll follow that model and ask our volunteer departments to reconsider so that we're making the right choices.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Yep.
Commissioner Mills is seconding. Okay. Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we're moving on to some maintenance work by Brooke Lassard with the Y, equipment replacement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. Up today, we have the YMCA equipment replacement. This process started before I came online, and when it was turned over to me, it was a much larger project. We started off in the $200,000 range for a full equipment replacement. And I walked that with Alex, and we have got it down to everything he wants to get done, and then we're gonna reupholster some of the older equipment, just because the upholstery is just worn out and cracked, and nobody likes to use it anymore. So we're gonna reupholster some of the existing stuff that will work just fine in the free weights division, and then we're gonna replace some of it with some pin weights, and consolidate some of the equipment to make more room for some other equipment that was requested by YMCA members.
So it looks like you're asking that the total amount is $36,605.44.
Yep, so what it comes down to, I got competing bids from Matrix and Precor. So the total number is, with Matrix, is $80,852.94. The Precor quote came in at $99,428.11. And what I'm looking for is the $938 monthly is a lease for the cardio equipment, so that we get a semi-annual maintenance agreement with the company that provides it, and then we'll replace it every 4 to 5 years when the lease comes up, and then we get some money for trade-in. So it's two purchases. One will do a lease, and that one is the 938. That's a total cost of $45,000, 44 with delivery, $44,247.50. And then that's what we'll lease. That will be all the step machines, treadmills, all of that equipment. And then for the 36, we'll get all the pin weight equipment, which doesn't wear out, and we can use for a long time. And that's the 36,605.44.
I believe the Y was open, was it 2015, when the Y opened?
Actually, about
It's
14.
14? Okay. So there's been some, obviously, updating over the years. This is kind of a major one, do you feel?
Yeah. No, it's a lot of the equipment was old when they got it,
Yeah.
but we're gonna reupholster some of that, and then some of the other equipment is worn out.
Yeah.
There is two pieces of equipment that I have not included in this because I'm still working on pricing. They're specialty equipment that is for our older demographic that works out up there. It's a recumbent, True Fitness is the only one who makes one of them, and that is a recumbent elliptical base workout machine, and then the other one is the New Step, which again is an easy one to get into and does other workout parts.
So you see a need to, shall we say, update for the generations that are using it?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm still trying to find some, they're expensive pieces of equipment. I mean, one is $5,000 and one is almost $8,000. So I'm still looking to see if there's any other options with other manufacturers that do the same thing on those two pieces.
Okay.
But I'd like to move forward and start the process on the larger.
Larger picture is always
Yeah.
good. Questions or comments?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Year and a half ago, at least, Ann would remember. You might remember. Anyway, the city and the county had 3 contracts that we needed to review. because they had not been reviewed for quite a while. One was with the city and the highway department for street maintenance and plowing. The other one was with the law enforcement center. And we were supposed to be, it was Commissioner Hawkins then, Johnson now. We were to meet with 2 city commissioners to go over the Y contract. And I'm requesting we do this so we can see, well, a couple of things. To be able to review those contracts, I would like the information about who is actually using the YMCA by demographics, by geography, by residents and non-residents. And this is not the school's contract. This is just what the county and the city pay. And I got the numbers from our auditor, and we pay $260,325 a year for the Y, and the city is paying $110,000 a year for the YMCA on an annual basis, of course, per year. So I am requesting that this will be going to Rena, I suppose, but that we get this reviewed, because this is a lot of money that it's a lot of money for our taxpayers, and I'm curious as to how many of our taxpayers benefit from the YMCA, take advantage of it. Plus also with the, how much, I would like the YMCA to let us know on a regular basis what their expenses are. Now, maybe they don't have to, I don't know. But how much of our county dollars are used to subsidize memberships and to pay and to give out free passes? That is definitely taxpayer money being given away. So not for the facility, but for the use of it. And I have questions on that. So someone make a note on that so we can get going.
Brady, could you tell us where the money would come from, the monthly payments? We have a couple of different pots that will come from it.
Yeah, we've got, we set aside money for Parks and Recreation through our annual state PILT, state in lieu of taxes. And we'd used all of that years ago. It was, there was nothing there, so but over the last few years, we have not, and that fund is built up. There's about $159,000 in there for the Parks and Trails Commission, for things like this.
And is any money coming out of capital funding?
For this? No, I mean like bonding? No, I wouldn't take it from bonding.
Yes, Andrew.
If I could, just to Commissioner White's comments and points. First, I believe Rena in the last round of being the interim looked at the YMCA contract, and so she'll have a level of familiarity and some experience there to exchange with you on that request. I'd also just like to share that Brooke and I both, we meet regularly with representatives from the Y, and I think Brooke would agree with me that Alex, the program director up there in particular, has been really great to work with, and he's provided us the annual budget, which is a line item within the existing contract so that we can see what the Y is budgeting, and we reciprocate, which we're required per the contract to provide to them. And he does provide a lot of updates on the sort of demographic questions of who uses that. So that's information that is available and coming to us already that will be able to help answer your questions. And I just wanted to share with you and publicly that the Y has been very helpful in that way, and in particularly Alex, I would say.
And so, Brooke, you could deal with delays, or would you really need to move forward with this?
I'd like to move forward,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's not the end of the world if we wait till, you know.
It might get cheaper.
I don't think so. But, yeah, no, it's been a long time in the works, so I think a month or a couple weeks, if we need to get some more information together, that's not a problem at all. It's not a problem. I mean, I'll probably come back with a little bigger ask then. By then, I'll have some more quotes on the new step and the True Fitness, the two pieces of equipment, so.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did request of Brady that the original contract and our current contract for the Y, because I wanted to do a comparison. I was with you, Commissioner Starley, when the Y began and when our contract was negotiated, and in our first initial meeting with all of the partners, which was the city and the school and the Y and the county, and our commitments as we have known and gone through this has significantly changed, and it changed significantly from not only a financial standpoint and the responsibility on part of the citizens of Cook County, all of the citizens of Cook County, but also the accountability issue. And so to Commissioner White's point, reevaluating things are healthy. They're healthy to look at these things and make sure that in good faith and with common sense that this is rightly ordered. And there's been some very frustrating experiences over the years, and the lack of accountability and the increasing costs and the misrepresentation of things from people in positions as administrator here, and that has not set well with the public. When you consider that we're looking at equipment whose upholstery is problematic and people don't like to use it, and we want to update every 4 or 5 years, and we've got people that are funding to the tune of the 200,000 something that we're paying that impacts their levy, and they can't fix their windows or fix their roof, and they couldn't afford a membership at the Y. That's a difficult thing, and we need to be mindful of that responsibility. As in, it can be said just generically, leadership has either you have confidence or you don't have confidence in leadership. And I did meet with Alex, and I would agree, and coming out of the building and a facilities, advisory board, that we have a good individual in that position. I think the indicators are that he's forthright, and he wants to build the credibility. He wants to hear what the feedback is, because he wants to align the YMCA and their purpose to build that trust relationship with the community, and certainly financial is a big part of it. But we need to realize that burden is falling on taxpayers, and when they can't make decisions and we make decisions that upgrade things and make things better, and it falls on them, that's a very difficult thing. Because we have a contract that this board has agreed to, we have an obligation from an integrity standpoint. And until we revisit that and find a balance that I think is more in line with intention when it was sold to us initially, we can't abdicate our responsibility under contract. And the way it's written right now, anything that comes up that they need, we got to foot the bill. That's the way it is. So I'm well aware of that, and our integrity is predicated on adherence to a contract that this board has agreed to at some point in time. But I agree, we need to reevaluate and look at this so that we're sensitive to the impacts. And I've said many times, when we call ourselves a community, we need to realize that community is made up of diversity, which is demographic, financial ability, and interests. And so in any decision, we need to be aware of the impacts of those decisions on that community as a whole. Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
I just want to thank Brooke for the work that he's done to get these costs down. Thinking that, we were looking at the possibility of $200,000 and we're now down to around $81,000 is really commendable. And so I want to thank you for your work. I think it's amazing that you've done that, and that we're looking at things in a little bit different way as how to proceed. I like the idea of leasing And your idea of reupholstering rather than just replacing is really wise.
I remember back in the decision-making years, back in 2011, 12, 13, 14, when they were talking about a Y here and the controversy, that was a different board. Now we have the Y, and it's our responsibility as a board to move forward with understanding of, yes, review contracts, make sure that if the city was going to be involved with any kind of equipment, that we understand that. If not, but I think the request right now is that we need to update some of the equipment. It's well-used. I became not a member in the beginning, but I use it a lot, and I have my little card that I pay for. And I believe at one time there was around 800 members. I don't know what the number is now. From talking to folks, I would think that the number has increased, but, you know, irregardless of numbers, it is really well used, and a lot of people, both ages, find that it's really allowing them to feel better, go to the pool, feel better, use the equipment. Otherwise, they would not have anything like that, because we lost our community pool, and that's how the Y idea came up. So that's more background than you probably want.
Oh, that's all right, that's all right.
Commissioner Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing in the building and facilities discussion on this issue is that the benefit of the leasing, it is a cost that is distributed, and it's also the maintenance that comes with it. So if we outright purchase, we will have costs that we incur that are the unknowns, but we're buying that warranty, so to speak. My recommendation would be that the board would table this, however, putting more work, and I agree, the resourcefulness you demonstrated is good. It's a combination, you working with Alex and the willingness of you two to be sensitive to the financial component, so that's admirable. I would like the other components when we're looking at this and stepping back overall, as you mentioned, I'd like to have that figure brought to us before we make a decision on this, so that we're looking at it, and it's not necessarily, and I won't say it's intended, it's just you got a lot of things that you're doing, but so that we're not little by little growing that figure. I'd like to see the full figure presented and then let the board make a decision informed.
So we have a suggestion that we table this. Does anybody else have another suggestion? Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to approve the purchase of new equipment and sign the lease for new cardio equipment.
So we have a
Support.
motion and second. Any further discussion or comments? Commissioner
I
Mills?
just want to thank Brooke for the work, much like Commissioner Sullivan did, and I know there's a lot of work going into this, and I think it's very important that we respect the agreement that we have in place, and I believe that's the third iteration of the contract, and you know, Rowan is absolutely right. When Rena was interim administrator, she liked to call the Y contract some low-hanging fruit, because there was some ways to clean it up and to make it nicer. And so at this point, the Y's costs are all on the operations sides of things, and the county's costs are all on the facility and the building side of things. We are the landlord, they are the tenant. They don't pay money to rent, but we don't pay them money for operations. We do give money in grants for childcare. That was something we decided as a board, but it's not just for the Y, it's for any childcare center in the community. As well as those free passes are through a grant, through public health, and I think that might be from the youth prevention funds, but I'm not sure, but it's not coming from levy dollars. And so I want to make that very clear, that the levy dollars are used for the facility, and that's something that we own and need to take care of, much like highway department or the courthouse or the community center, and then the operations themselves, that's the Y dollars. So I believe that's the case also with the city's dollars. That goes to the facility costs, not operations. So two very different things. And I think that's important to have that kind of clean cut, because that's where a lot of the confusion and concern, I think, that Commissioner Gamble was referencing came from, was just, it was a little messy and intertwined. And so I think there's been some real good work done and more to happen and healthy to review, but where this is coming from, I think, is spot on, so thank you.
Question for Brooke. Can you still, in the next couple of weeks, be able to get us those additional costs?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right.
And those are new, it's like, we hadn't had those before in the community, right?
Right,
This is-
right. They
Or it's
have them.
replacing something? or-
They're currently broken and don't work.
Ah.
They're in the room. They were well used when we received them, is my understanding. They were not purchased new, and they get a lot of use from the older demographics, so they're currently missed.
That's the recumbent elliptical and the
Yep.
stairs.
There's the
new
two
step-
pieces of equipment right when you walk into that upper room, the first two right in front of you. They're very easy access to get in and out of, and does a lot of the same workout as a treadmill and stair climbers and the ellipticals, just in a recumbent, comfortable position, designed specifically for that demographic.
Sure, or maybe physical therapy or something?
Yeah.
or- Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so we've had a motion and a second that we move forward with this project with the additional costs in a couple weeks. Okay, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We have four and one against in the vote. Thank you very much, Brooke.
Thank you.
Lot of work, really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to move on, and she disappeared.
Well, should we take a break?
You want a break? Okay. We'll have a 5 to 8 minute break.
I think I just
Welcome back. We'll resume our board meeting, going on to item 7A. We also have a B, but we'll start with A, Human Resources.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Apologies first for my oversight. I thought I had attached the agreement to the board agenda, also announcing this to the public for your viewing pleasure. So I have printed them out and we've handed them out to the board, but we'll make sure that we get that attached for minute purposes. So in front of you, we have the employment agreement for our new interim county administrator, Rena Rogers. So I was on vacation during the last board meeting in March, in which action was taken for that transition, Rowan moving back to his MIS director position and bringing Rena on, I'm combining words in my head, Rena on as the new interim administrator, and starting last Monday, the 31st, and that the board wanted Rowan and I to meet with Rena to develop a contract, really negotiate the pay and any additional benefits. So therefore, we have the agreement that lays out those discussions for you. I'll just kind of summarize some of the big things that are included in that agreement. The salary, her pay, we negotiated, and we have Rena starting off at grade 270, which is the grade associated with the county administrator job description, and putting her kind of in the middle of the range at a step 4, which would equate to $68.69 per hour. And then that would just be paid just like any other payroll on a biweekly schedule. And then we also have we discussed benefits, insurances, those optional items available. So some of those items are summarized as well and addressed in the agreement. Something to note with PARA, the Public Employees Retirement Association, that's the pension plan for public employees. Typically that is mandatory. However, since Rena is a PARA retiree, she's actually exempt. We are exempt from paying that, so that is money that the county doesn't have to pay out on that behalf. Paid leave, we also discussed, given kind of the quick nature of bringing Rena in, she already had some pre-existing appointments and time scheduled off, and we wanted to honor that. So we're kind of figuring out the potential accumulation of paid leave and front-loading up to 32 hours of that time off for her to be able to utilize right away. Other than that, some other things, Rena is waiving health insurance, dental, vision insurance, so there are some savings also on behalf of the county for not having to pay for the employer portion of those benefits.
Okay. Thank you for working on all this with everybody. And any questions or comments at this time?
Oh, I should just add too that we did have County Attorney Peterson review the agreement as well to make sure that everything was kosher and meeting requirements, law requirements, statute requirements, and she has given her thumbs up for that.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the interim county attorney employment agreement for Rena Rogers.
Support.
Any questions or comments? Otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
So thank you.
Okay, and if you will stay for a minute. We had an item pulled from the consent agenda. Commissioner Gamble had a question about hiring Abigail Prom as environmental technician. Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this position previously, in my previous term as commissioner, was handled by the county engineer, and I believe that the state funded it at $6,000. I think since the requirement for a county inspector, agriculture inspector, was initiated since 1929, there's been no funding unless there's an appropriation made by the legislature to help fund. But as I recall, that our county engineer would handle those responsibilities, and 6,000 is what we were given, and that's what we paid. Since that time now, we've hired an individual, and then we changed that title to agriculture inspector when we proposed this environmental position. So when we look at the funding, and I know in 2023, and I think again in February 2025, that the state has proposed some fundings, I believe $1 million each of those years, which only 3% of that money can be used for this position. My question is, if we, to Brady, is if we are, and if you're aware, Allison, of any monies that are going to defray the cost for these positions. But in this position, there, when I look at where we were and where we have moved to, we've created a position, agriculture inspector, over and above the responsibility for noxious weeds and things, that amongst other things, that if you look at the legislation that the state has proposed, that there's compliance requirements in order to get any of those monies, and so you go through that list, and if we meet that, then we get those monies to help defray this cost. But we've created that separate position, which has provided some benefits because insignificant, not insignificant, because our county engineer has secured more grant monies and funding for our roads than before. And maybe it's because it's freed up his time in this, but an assessment of that time involvement and things relative to the cost, and then hiring an additional position, which this position that is before us today, those costs relative to questionable funding to supply that, because of the supervisory role that has now bumped that agriculture inspector up, I just, and again, respectfully, I'll say that to the extent I don't have all of the information that informed this decision coming in when I came in, but I have trouble adding layers of financial responsibility if they aren't well intended. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because they certainly are well intended. It's just whether they're well informed. When I looked at this, and it was on the agenda previously, I looked at the 87 counties and how many of them had more than one person handling that position. And a significant number of the counties do not. So if we look at comparable counties and how we staff this, it would be interesting to see that to inform this decision. The other thing we're all aware of, if we are growing additional layers of financial responsibility with what we're seeing at the state and federal level and the cutting that is going on, and there won't be monies, and we look at 92% of our property being government-owned, which is payment in lieu of taxes as a revenue source, that it's not looking good on that front when we have state and federal government wanting to pull out their obligations in order to mitigate some of their financial pressures with the increasing costs that we're seeing in the $1 billion in shortfall. And so our public health, human services, our PILT, our type Blackneck, all of these things are being affected. And we, as a county out of 87 counties in this state, are probably more affected by that than many of the other counties. And then Brady said that our revenue, when we look at other revenue sources that come from our investments, they performed well, but there's years where they have not performed well. When Brady says we really aren't getting what we anticipated in projecting our revenues. So my point is, in a market that shows downfall and uncertainties as far as funding sources, we cannot continue to add additional costs that put burdens on taxpayers when we have so few that fund our operations up here in Cook County.
So Allison, could you give us a little background into the folks that are involved in this with TIA and And now, looking at Abigail.
Right. So being fairly new in this position, I didn't necessarily have all of the back information. So I was chatting with County Engineer Robbie Haas this morning to kind of get some information of like, if there's these questions, what can I tell them? So I just want to share with you to kind of address not only the questions, Commissioner Gamble, that you had about the ag inspector role being separated from the county engineer, but then also a little backstory of kind of the transition in the seasonal position to a permanent part-time, permanent full-time, it's just reduced hours, with the hire of Abigail. So in terms of the ag inspector typically being paired with the county engineer, which we've seen historically in our county, and what you see, you mentioned comparables, in other counties, that is accurate. However, the only task that Robbie was able to do as the ag inspector, also in his role as the county engineer at the time, was actually put out the noxious weed notice. Beyond that, he was never able to accomplish anything else that is required of the ag inspector, or those additional tasks that are written into state statute. So they recognized the need to be able to split that, so there was actual more action that was able to be taken outside of his capacity. He just didn't have doing the county engineer role. So the work of the environmental division that they're now doing has benefited the county by removing noxious weeds, organizing native replanting efforts, garnered positive intergovernmental relationships with the U.S. Forest Service, MnDOT, DNR, Grand Marais, and Grand Portage, and has dramatically expanded the outreach they're able to do about how important preserving and maintaining our environment is. So a lot more has been accomplished, especially fulfilling the requirements in state statute than what usually is able to be accomplished when the ag inspector position is paired with a county engineer position. And then in terms of this specific position for Abigail, let's see, so Robbie writes, quick backstory. The board recognized a need in the county to preserve our natural environment and approved the creation of the ag inspector role 3 years ago. So that's when Tia was hired. After the first year of having someone full-time in that role, it was apparent additional help was needed. So we phased in the creation of the environmental technician position over the next 3 years to minimize levy impacts. The environmental tech position started as a seasonal job. I think as I mentioned in the packet, that Abigail was also in that seasonal role. And it is now expanded into a permanent full-time role, but full-time as in 30 hours. And I believe Robbie had budgeted for 9 months. So by the time that the new year rolled around, we would do the recruitment efforts. That person could fill out and work those 30 hours full-time through the end of the year. And then Robbie's goal in 2026 is hopefully to extend that and make it a year-round full-time position. So Robbie is being thoughtful in how that does impact the levy. He also wants to note that, let me find it. These changes have been worked through and discussed at the Highway Advisory Committee and the COW to gather that input and support in those transitions. And it's the first time the Highway Department is expanding its FTEs in over 20 years. So still kind of thinking of the levy, they've kind of modified and shuffled things around, but they have not added FTEs over the last 20 plus years. So this is the first change that they are seeing.
Thank you.
Does that help answer?
Good background, yes. Some of the points I had forgotten about, so,
Yes.
very good. Any questions or further comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the background. Thank you, Commissioner Gamble, for the questions and concerns. And this is something that we had talked about before and strategically and intentionally pursued. It's really looking at the upstream. I mean, when we're talking about costs, the costs of trying to eliminate invasives after they are a much stronger foothold in a community is much, much higher, if not impossible, to accomplish than the preventative ones. And so part of this strategy also enables the rest of the department to be able to kind of have eyes on our ditches and boots on the ground for taking care of this and kind of developing more of a team effort along this front. And so I think it's just very well thought out, and certainly it is higher costs, but I'd also say other counties are probably further along the line of impacts already. So I appreciate that they're spending less, but I think it's important to recognize that they're maybe not as effective either, and that impacts our environment and our lives.
And I like the idea that this will be evaluated at the end of the year, so it's not a commitment that's going on for years and years, and see where it goes. Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you look at the state statute that defines this and the responsibilities and the roles on it, it's pretty straightforward as to what the responsibility is. And if you look at comparable counties, and when I say comparable, I mean apples to apples, which is looking at how much land mass we have and the effects of invasive, all of those things, that when you talk to them and you...
Wait, which counties are comparable with effects of invasives?
Well, if you look at Lake County and you look at St. Louis County and you look at just the Arrowhead, just look at the Arrowhead.
I think St. Louis County is a lot more invasives than we do.
Well, I'm just saying, when you look at comparable counties on the exposure as well as the financial stand and the tax base to support these things, which are all comparisons.
Well, St. Louis wouldn't be in that case then, the tax base.
Well, I'm saying if you want to look at the Arrowhead, granted,
so
that's
it's just
my point.
Us and
That's
Lake.
my point.
It's just us and Lake that we're comparing.
Pardon?
It's just us and Lake County that we're comparing?
No, you can compare others, and when you're comparing apples to apples, which is based upon the issue we're talking about here, which is the susceptibility to invasive.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the apples, like.
Yeah, that's right, and I'm saying that you can put forth those apples, and when you look at what the state statute defines as the roles and responsibilities, that we can always talk about the element that is bigger and broader, that from the emotional standpoint of invasives, which is a bad word and a bad thing, and so how many dollars do we throw at it? And I'm just saying, I'm not comfortable with the backstory, given the responsibility and the role. And when I look at the comparables, people have to find, we pride ourselves on being resourceful. I need to see the resourcefulness that demonstrates that we find a way to do what we do without having to put more tax dollars at it. And it is not just simply saying that putting more tax dollars at it is a mantra that you just say without awareness. What I mean by that is that if we just look at Brooke and his resourcefulness relative to the equipment we just talked, that is the discipline that we need to see, that those decisions that we make that affect taxpayer dollars are substantiated with well-reasoned, understood, factual, connected to requirements. My question is, are there any monies that we are getting of the monies that have been allocated by the legislature to contribute to this cost? Those monies in 2023 and 2025 February have come before the legislature to say, are we going to do this? 3% of that $1 million during that period of time can be used, but you have to comply and go through these requirements. It's on us to request them. My question is, have we requested it, and are we getting any money to defray these increased costs?
My understanding is that he's set money aside for this in his department, in the highway department.
In the budget.
In the budget.
I am not familiar with their funding sources
Yeah.
or grant opportunities, and I would recommend that those questions be deferred to Robbie and Lisa Sorley, the highway accountant, to the subject matters, or even Tia, if you have questions about the functions, the successfulness of the invasive species program that these two positions run, that I would defer to those subject matters, those questions that you have.
And they'll come before the board with an extensive budget plan in a few months, and that'd be a good time to ask that question. Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, and, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, but if we're talking about like $6,000 or triple it or quadruple it, say it's $25,000. When we had the discussion at the committee of the whole about opportunities, impacts, opportunity cost, and having Engineer Haas show the $12 million in grants that he brought in because he had the time to look for that, because he outsourced some of the engineering projects. I think it really demonstrated his ability and aptitude for finding dollars when there is the capacity to do so. And so, in my mind, that was a really great reason to allow for this expansion. Is, well, this hopefully will bring in a lot more dollars, maybe not 25,000, maybe it'll be 100,000, or, there's larger grants for doing this, regardless of what the state is requiring. We still need to do it. And if we can recoup some from the state, awesome. That's less off the levy, and that's always something we want. But I don't think we want to hold up our potential because of just some of the uncertainties, especially when we've budgeted for it already.
Commissioner White?
Well, in light of things, our past discussions, in case for any reason no one's been paying attention, we have these tariffs worldwide. We have worldwide economic issues going on. And in all of the committees that I have been on in the last 2 weeks that involve, some of them involve DNR, Forest Service, health, with the health department, with mental health, the funding is being cut off. They cannot, they're saying, well, it's been delayed. Highway, it's been delayed. Well, delay is maybe just a euphemism for, we hope we get it, but there's a darn good chance it's not coming again, at least not for the near future. People, talking heads on the national level are talking about recessions. And I hardly believe this is the time for us to be increasing our payroll. I mean, yes, things that are out there and what Tia does and what Robbie is doing and has done and continues to do have great value. But sometimes we can't afford everything that's good. We can't afford it. Our taxpayers can't afford it.
Sometimes we can't afford not to, too.
We will be overrun with tansy and we'll wake up some morning choked out because of the tansy that's over. In this particular instance, aquatic invasive species, with the damage to our waters and the number of waters in this along the North Shore, that's a different thing that will really be changing the ecology, the environments inside lakes when they have invasive species that wipe out other native plant matters. But things are good, but sometimes you can't afford everything you want, or even you can't afford things that would really make it easier going down the road. The impending recession, or whatever might be coming, is frightening. And we have not just, it is something that has to be taken very seriously. We can't just say, well, we live in Cook County. Well, yeah, we live in Cook County with 92% of the property not privately owned, dependent on our health service, dependent on federal dollars, and when those pots of money dry up, we're going to be in a world of hurt, And so I think at this point in time, and again, I am not denigrating the value of what TIA has done and how it has expanded, but I believe we need to hold the line on expenditures where we can. at this point in time. Give it 6 months, maybe everything will be better again. Great, great. But as far as this particular position, at this moment in time, I think we should just, if nothing else, have Robbie come and explain to us one more time how, because Tia's in that position, he is able to bring in or spend X amount of time to bring in X more money. But as he has also said, he's got projects that are not happening because his funding source from the feds is on hold for who knows how long. So,
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment that this is a 30-hour position, which we have talked about at the Committee of the Whole and prior to that discussion at the Highway Department about being phased in over time. And this is something that's budgeted for the rest of the year. I would agree, Commissioner White, that if things happen at a federal and a state level, once those budgets are determined, these are the kinds of things we may all be forced to look at and may be forced to cut. But I think today, with what we have and what we know, that this at least gives us one more season to attack terrestrial invasive species. And I would argue they are just as critical to our environment here along the North Shore as our aquatic invasive species. They're both important.
So I've heard all your comments and questions and explanations.
And messaging with Robbie, he can be here in just a few minutes if you would like to follow up with him on these questions, if you want clarification, more explanation.
Sounds like that'd be helpful.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, okay, then we'll put that on hold. Mr. Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just another comment. We have before us on our agenda today a resolution appealing to the legislature to make sure that our Ty Blacknick funding doesn't go away or isn't cut. And that's a reality. And it just seems that we're not connecting the dots when we are so dependent on these monies, and we've got federal and state that are trying to cut their problems on our backs, which translates to our, that's a reality. That is a reality. And do you think that there are legislatures down there, people in Washington and the state legislature, that are not groaning over these realities and having to make hard decisions? But they see the realities and they're wrestling with it, and we need to feel that. We need to wrestle with these realities.
So Robbie will be coming?
He's turning on to Fifth Avenue right now.
Okay. We'll put this on hold for a few minutes. Maybe Brady can just update us on the public hearing that will be requested.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is part of the bonding process for the solid waste bonds. And because the facility, we want it to be a tax exempt facility, there's something in the statutes. The bond attorney found that to have this be a tax exempt facility, we need to hold a public hearing first before we can say, okay, we're going to go bond for this. So that's what this is to set that public hearing for the public to come in and have a chance to comment on this on April 22nd at 9 a.m. And then at that point, you can take action if you so desire on starting Ellers on the bonding process.
Okay. Very good. Commissioner White?
could you explain one more time why North Shore Waste should be nonprofit? Is it because they're county-owned?
It's not nonprofit. This is for the bonding of the facility, the bonds themselves, to be tax exempt.
Yes, sorry.
And the cost of building that.
Okay, sorry.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion to support the public hearing for the bonding.
Second that motion.
Any further questions or comments?
I expected a question on what's a gross revenue bond? because we don't hear that term very often, but that's just referring to the fact that the bond payments are expected to be paid by the solid waste fees that we'll be collecting. That's the gross revenue, so anyway, thanks.
Okay, that's all clear now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
Opposed, same sign, motion passes unanimously. Welcome, Robbie. I hope you didn't, have to do any speed limits on this. He wouldn't
We
admit
just
it
won't
anyway.
answer that.
Thank
Yes.
you for coming.
Absolutely, yeah. I missed the brunt of the conversation just because I was in my truck. But it sounds like there's questions on funding or on why we're doing this. What are the questions?
Commissioner Gamble, who would start?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. So what we had talked about, or what I had expressed before, is that in your position, in my first term, then the highway engineer did this, and we had monies allocated, I believe, allocated from the state, although that's not been the case, that the state necessarily makes monies available since 1929, because it was an unfunded mandate. However, the highway engineer at that time would do whatever they did for the 6,000, and that was it.
Right.
Since that time, and I understand things change in 10 years, and so when I look at the requirements as defined by state statute, and I look at any potential funding that comes available from the legislature, if we are in compliance with meeting certain requirements in that position, then we can get those revenues to help defray some of these costs. When I looked at the 87 counties in comparison when this first was on the agenda and how many staff individuals they had in the position, the greater majority did not have multiple positions. When we went with the independent decision and it freed you up, there's real benefit there. I don't discount that. When I look at with the money that you're able to generate because you're not distracted, it's similar with the county administrator that's putting out fires and can't do any strategic planning. So that has to be evaluated. But we seem to be, based upon the requirements of the position by state statute and the additional hires and positions in a market that is questionable with revenues, and if we've even tapped any of the revenues that come available, I'm opposed to growing additional positions in a very, very difficult market, let alone an assessment to see with similar counties how they manage it. And the intangibles certainly are something when we look at, and we've had this conversation, that in the history of, our county engineer, you've generated so many more dollars and projects, which is beneficial.
Right.
But
tens of millions.
Yeah. So I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to. That doesn't mean that the scrutiny and the fiscal discipline that needs to be applied to every position should be ruled out. So
right. That's a lot to unpack. Yeah, there's 87 counties. Historically, the ag inspector role has sat either in my chair or soil and water or land services, something like that. I didn't do anything. So that's a big difference. I don't know anything about plants.
Yeah.
So I collected $6,000 a year to put out the noxious weed notice, which is one email, and that's it. And so what this board decided about 3 years ago, after we worked it through Highway Committee several times, Committee of the Whole several times, discussions here several times, was the importance of preserving our natural environment up here. While you're correct, there might not be large, quote, we're looking at 2 people in an environmental division. I'm sure, I could look at St. Louis County, you could look at other rural counties, and whether or not they have one or not, but we made the decision here that preserving our natural environment was important, and that this came up a lot in conversations with constituents. It's why we all live here, frankly, and also why a lot of people visit, is that. And so I don't know if you've ever been in a lake infested with milfoil, for example. I don't know if Allison gave that example already. Or, my lake, Pike Lake, it's infested with rusty blue crayfish. There's no more fish. You can't go fishing anymore. And so, it's preventing that type of stuff from spreading. And so the environmental side of things, we get a lot of pushback on because people just say, well, it's the environment, it's fine, it's all there. Well, if we don't try and prevent a lot of those things, it gets worse and it goes away. And so that's where 3 years ago we felt that, developing the independent ag inspector position was important. And I want to hammer the point home that that wasn't a new FTE. We're reshuffling the deck of cards that we have. Actually, the highway department, and I think Allison mentioned it, we haven't added an FTE in over 2 decades. And so this is the first one in over 20 years of potentially adding one. And so we felt too, as I've talked about with, strategic planning and looking ahead into the future and the additional needs that our county sees, we've talked about adding a maintenance worker position and saying we know how much that costs. That's $400,000 right off the bat between a person with benefits and a truck. Well, that's ridiculous to come here in 1 year and say, hey, I need $400,000 to add a person in a truck, so let's phase it in over 7+ years, slowly increment it to minimize that impact. And so now when we pivot to this environmental technician position, that's exactly what we've done. It's been 3 years in the making, not only to prove that, hey, there's a need for it, we're doing work, we're coordinating with MnDOT and Portage and the DNR and the Forest Service to do these outreach programs, to do work. We're treating over 50+ sites every year in the county, preventing the spread of invasive species, helping the aquatic invasive species side as well with soil and water do all of this work to preserve our environment up here. And so this isn't something knee-jerk. This isn't something that we just thought of and wanted to do and wanted to add a person or, this is years in the making. And then the last thing that I'll say is, this was approved in our 2025 budget. So it's there already. And so we had a great, robust candidates that had applied. We had 9 people apply for it, which was wonderful. I haven't had 9 people apply for anything. And so it was great. And so we ended up interviewing 3 people, great interviewees, and so this is where we landed on Abigail, and she's wonderfully qualified for it. She's already been doing a great job with us. And I hope that answers. There's a lot of different things. Yeah.
I can add too.
Yeah.
I know Commissioner Gamble had questions on the funding, so I've been messaging with Lisa Sorley, the highway accountant.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to add too, that certain parts of both this position and the ag inspector's position are covered by the Great Lakes Restorative.
There's a GLRI fund that we pursue every single year, and so if we get it, we can use those funds to offset their salaries. But regardless, my goal was to not have a grant-funded position. A lot of places do have that, and all that position ends up worrying about is finding grants to get so they get paid. And I didn't want that, and that was something we had talked about here. Historically, that CCIT coordinator position was grant-funded, and people rotated in and out of it, I think, every 1 or 2 years. And then it was just unstable and completely fell apart. And so by really making this, a levy-funded position where it's you're guaranteed your salary, you don't have to worry about it, just do the good work. We were able to fill these roles and do a lot of, like I said, all the work that we've been doing with that.
And then in addition to that, recently implemented were the pesticide applicator testing fees.
Right.
Tia is able to host a testing site for those.
Right.
And then she mentioned project engineering fees when Tia and Abigail collaborate on invasives and planting plans.
Right. Yep, there's that too. Yep. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Robbie, for coming. And
Absolutely.
Thank you, Allison, for all the good background. I've heard all of your comments and questions. We have pulled this, and we need to act upon it. So I will make a motion to hire Abigail Prom as environmental technician.
Support.
Any further comments or questions? Alden.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment that whether it's governance or whether it's industry, evidence-based is a lot which informs decisions. And in corrections, we look at different programming, and Minnesota is huge on a certain approach when it comes to corrections. And you compare other states and their corrections programs, and we can see through evidence-based the effects of our programming. And when it comes to identifying a problem, to the extent that we can, when the scope of the problem is huge, we need to see the evidence that is tangible over and above those things that are not so tangible. What I mean by that is that we've had more opportunity. There's been departments that have requested to go full-time, and then I say, well, what would you do? And they tell me what they're going to do, and it doesn't warrant it. I mean, getting information out. Partnershiping certainly is important. Looking at where we have duplication of effort within our, departments as they are right now, soil and water, whatever it might be. We need to find efficiencies. We need to be mindful of the funding source. I understand it takes work when we get grant monies, and oftentimes before the board, somebody gets grant monies, and they come up and say, we got these monies so we can have this position. And I would continually say, well, let the person know that when the monies go away, the position goes away. But we establish a relationship, we feel bad, and so we create a position, and then we layer that on the taxpayer. And so I would say, tangibly, I'd like to look at the revenue source. If we have those revenue sources, just like you've been, very enterprising when it comes to finding monies to do roads, where are we looking for monies to defray some of this cost so everything isn't impacting our levy? And I'd like to see the evidence that's tangible evidence as to the effects of that position being what it is. And
I'd invite you out for a field visit this summer.
Sure.
We have about 50 different sites that they're inspecting, and so everybody is welcome. We can identify them in all of your districts.
Sure.
Of the different invasive species that we're treating and going out. You're welcome to hop in the canoe too for some of the aquatic invasive
Sure.
stuff that they're doing. But
Yeah.
it's like I said, we apply for the GLRI grant. That's the big
Yeah.
one. That's the main one.
Yeah.
That helps offset costs. So
Yeah.
if we get it, great, and if we don't, try again.
Yeah, and the other thing is just, again, the state funding revenue, it requires compliance with a list of about 6 or 7 things that have to be done, not just the posting thing, as you mentioned, but
Right.
these things, and
Right.
and if we're doing that, so we can try to defray that cost,
Right.
that's beneficial. But anyway, I appreciate the conversation, and
Totally.
and my intent certainly is not to be mindful of the need to address this issue. It's just looking at overall things in our limited budget and the impacts of declining dollars that everybody else makes hard decisions. I don't think it's a time to be growing additional positions. So, and when we say, well, it's in the budget, that's not yeah, it's in the budget, but should it be in the budget? And when we see that state and federal say, yeah, it's in the budget, well, yeah, but we don't have the money, then that's a reality. So I'm not trying to over-dramatize it, but I am trying to demonstrate the responsibility and requirement for fiscal responsibility, evaluation, and making hard decisions.
So we have a motion and a second. I will call for a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes 3 in favor, 2 against. Thank you for coming. I will more than happy to travel with you to see the tansy
Yes.
in the West End and all over.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okey dokey. So, item number 8, moving on to administrator hiring discussion. Administrator updates.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We'll have Pat from DDA join the conversation and talk about any changes that the board would like to make to the hiring process before we repost and put it back out to the search for the full-time county administrator position.
morning, Pat Bowles speaking.
Good morning, Pat. This is Rowan Watkins. I got the full board here with us, and we're ready to have the discussion on next steps for hiring the county administrator.
Wonderful, thank you.
So I'll frame it up a little bit. The board received some information from Commissioner Gamble on items to consider for to be included within or incorporated within the hiring process. This was something that we had made reference to at our last meeting, and then sort of ended the conversation by saying it could be addressed at this meeting on the 8th, and we've had time to review that information, and we're here now to have that conversation. I've shared that information as well with Pat, so the DDA has it for reference. And with that, I'll turn it over to the board chair and let you guys go from there.
Good morning, Pat.
Good morning. Good morning, board members.
Yes, we're hoping to get the wheels going again. And,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if any of the board members have any questions or comments about moving forward with certain items, and to have a discussion on that then. So Commissioner Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To begin with, I'd like to thank Commissioner Gamble for putting together his materials, and what was absolutely amazing to me as I read through this, and I'm sure for other board members, you appreciate it as well. It was like deja vu looking back at our time with Pat over a couple of days last fall, and the kinds of input that were received from staff and from board members. So it was really reaffirming to feel like we're on the same page, in spite of the fact that you weren't there for that particular part of the process. I also felt really comforted with the fact that Commissioner Storley and I attended a leadership training from AMC, and in the materials that we had, it very much supported everything that we have in our process. It was just really reaffirming, and I'm sure she has the book that I have as well, Outperform the Norm for Leaders. But I would really like to, down the line as we move forward with this process, before we actually engage in our hiring, make sure that members of the board have an opportunity to read this book. It's a one afternoon read, it's real quick, but it really confirms the important things, the values that we hold dear to us, the mission of our organization, and how to take different personality traits and characteristics, observations, written work from people who are applying for these positions, and take that all into account. So I just feel very good that everything is lining up as it should.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. I feel the same way also. The only thing that I had a little conversation with Pat was the questions, and because I had done the first question and the last question, I wanted to kind of redo the first question. I thought I got too deep all of a sudden, and so I'll work with Pat on that and get back to you on how we'll kind of refigure the first and last question. That's the only input I have. Commissioner Sullivan?
And Commissioner Storley, maybe you want to talk about the questions I shared with you that you shared with Pat about potentially candidates having an opportunity to observe an interview on a live stream.
We had a discussion about that, and the conversation went like this, I think, Pat, that we talked about that, and you said you were going to redo that at the next interview with bringing a candidate in?
Yes. You know, in this situation, yeah, we had individuals that, came right into the boardroom. I think in the future we'll have kind of a waiting area. I think there's also a possibility of, if you're recording, also delaying the playback until a later time so that there's no opportunity for individuals to, learn some of the questions in advance. There's a number of things where we can maybe do things a little differently if that's the interest of the board, and certainly, I'm just listening to kind of hear what your thoughts are at this point, but I have a couple thoughts on things that would maybe improve the process, having been through it the first time and the way things flowed. But yes, we can certainly make changes to the questions. I think, in just reviewing Gary's material, maybe Commissioner Gamble, I apologize, his material, maybe if you want more scenario questions, we can certainly do that. There's a lot of different options, but yes, we can certainly make those changes to the questions and how that is all set up in the morning with individuals coming in for the interviews.
I think even in the 4 years that we've been between administrators, technology really gives an opportunity for candidates to really look us over. And so I think we want to make it as smooth as possible and not have any hiccups along the way. And so we recognize that. Any other comments for Pat? Anything else that you need from us, Pat?
So it sounds like then with regards to the profile as it stands right now is something that the whole board supports. What we will do is we will then repost it, and I'll start doing the outreach. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Is that everybody's happy with the current profile, and then doing a similar process to what we did last time, which we don't have to determine that right now, but hopefully formulating our thoughts on, do we wish to have the value statement in there again, and obviously as we go forward talking about, are there other small changes that you'd like to make in the process?
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Pat. This is Commissioner Gamble. You mentioned in your conversation now that there were some thoughts that you had. I guess I'd like to hear those thoughts on process.
Sure. And, I chatted a little bit with staff, and some things that I think if the board is interested in doing, we can certainly do. One of those is to maybe allow a little more time in between interviews and maybe have a more in-depth discussion with the board about asking follow-up questions. Obviously we want to try and stick with the same set of questions, but in terms of how people respond, some people are more forthcoming. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper with candidates. I think maybe allowing time in between interviews would allow the commissioners to have a more meaningful discussion, and not that you always have to ask a follow-up question, but certainly give you more comfort asking follow-up questions if the candidates don't ask or you want further clarification. So maybe revisiting that topic and just not being pressed for time would be one way that we could improve the process. Another idea that came up was maybe having the questions available to the candidates either at the interview or possibly, 10, 15 minutes beforehand. As long as they're all treated the same, that's the key thing. But that might, help break down some of the nervousness that, people do experience as they're dealing with an interview. And certainly, having the questions and being able to look at them is not going to significantly impact their responses, but it will help them when they're up there at the interview table. And then, as I mentioned earlier, delaying the replay so that, the third candidate isn't able to watch and see what the questions are that are being asked. And then it was the possibility of me doing maybe a little better summary in terms of how we go from, for instance, 41 candidates to 10 candidates, which is basically where I go through and I filter, but maybe having just a very brief summary from me on what the candidates that did not make it to the board, what those candidates, what their background or what their experience or education looked like, just so that you can kind of get a glimpse into why did these candidates get forwarded onto the board and why did these not. Obviously, you have a minimum qualifications that you're looking for, but just further kind of helping you to understand how I come to that conclusion.
Okay. Interim Watkins?
Madam Chair, thank you. Pat, thank you. And I think the mechanics that you're talking about are really important. Something that I'd like to throw out for consideration for the board is just to zoom out a little bit, and it's because of the experience that I had in the conversations with individual commissioners through this last process we put a lot of emphasis on administrator experience, and kind of to your last point about who made it through to be a semifinalist and who didn't, and how does the board feel good about those decisions and that process that we're turning over to DDA to make for us. I guess I'd kind of two things: look for the board to maybe reaffirm that, or kind of put those two pieces together. I think we've had a lot of conversations about the importance of it, but that you can fall off on either side of the road, so to speak. That you just having the experience alone isn't maybe enough. That if you don't have the soft skills and the personality and the values and the relational qualities, that can present an issue. And I think we saw some of that in the last interview process. And so, should the board affirm that, I'd look to you, Pat, for recommendations on how through this process we could incorporate that, where we're not an either or, but an and. How are we making sure that we get candidates that both have the level of experience that we need, because we know that that's something that's important to do this job, but also that are going to have the softer skills and the values and the other things that we've talked so much about, to make sure that gets incorporated into the candidates that get moved forward.
Certainly, I'd be more than happy to work with you and the board on that.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Commissioner Gamble. I think to the extent that the board identifies through the participation of staff and the community, the values and the qualities that we want to see in candidates, the more that we clearly understand those things and the importance of them, the more that in the document that I presented, in calling respected individuals and asking staff who responded, the things that they are looking for and the things they're concerned about, those are things that are to help us refine so that we are very focused. And the nature of our questions should enable us to be able to mine out those things that we've identified as the qualifications and the qualities that we're looking for. So you've got hard side skills, which is education and experience, and you've got soft side skills. I've always maintained the soft side skills are largely more important than the hard side skills, because who a person is, if they are the right person, they will handle changing circumstances and everything because of who they are. And I think that our questions need to reflect more of that mining out, who are you as a person? And because I believe that is foundational to the ability of a person to be successful in the position. And I think it's borne out in the responses from respected individuals and staff when you ask the question, what's the one quality and what's the one red flag? And in our experience as a county, when we transitioned into the form of county governance, which I was a part of, our first administrator had no experience as a county administrator, but they were the right person. So the who bore out the fact that that is integral to the success of an individual in the position. And I think it's borne out by others in their responses and saying, it all depends upon if they are this type of person. The individual that I included from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, the woman administrator, I just happened on that, and boy, in reading that gave testimony to the fact that who she as a person, even though she was young and everything else, it would say, well, this is the person we want, but who she was, she is highly regarded, highly respected, and recognized in the broader context in her governance role by people that put her up for recognition. So I felt that because the county administrator form of governance was new to us in Cook County, that we would have been better served had we had an administrator who was well respected, had been long tenured, and was on the verge of retirement, that would come in and would be strong in who they are as an individual in a healthy way and mentor us into this form of governance. Our first individual was an excellent individual who unfortunately we lost due to cancer. And then we had two other administrators that came in. And I think that the role and the experience is a matter of weighing what that experience has taught us. And that doesn't rule out the fact that when we look at all the applicants that come in, if we have identified our values and what we're looking for in the who, we can look at these applicants, and I believe we took the applicants and went through based upon responses that we got from questions, and we graded each question for a total assessment of which applicant we felt we wanted to move forward with. And I believe that our questions need to reflect, again, and enable us as decision makers to be able to mine out those things we said we feel are important. And that's why some of these other instruments that are used in measuring that are, I believe, very important. And I think that our questions should be revisited. I think there's some redundancy in the nature of the questions we've had, and I think that many of those questions do not address the issue of who they are as a person, but more what they've done. I need to know who they are as a person. And that's why the core values is a very important thing. The other things that I had suggested are also very important things in measuring who are you as a person. And if we got all of those applicants in and we looked at it, if your narrative is there to help us understand, but we did not even look at it to know whether there might be somebody as a person, even though they didn't have the experience, that we were willing to explore further, as we did in the case of our first administrator, who did not have the experience. But anybody you talked to in the county that he came from, that you'd bump into, just said, you're going to love him. And it was because of the who. And I had the privilege of speaking at his celebration of life service after he passed. And when I walked into that church, the number of attributes and things in that whole foyer was loaded with things that spoke to who this person was. And I believe it's important that we have the ability to be able to see who these individuals are in that context of their values and what they bring to the table, and then have questions that help us to mine that out. And I'm not opposed to, well, I think the questions, if you do a video interview, you get to see the person and how they respond, not just their verbal or their written response, but I'd like to see the questions revisited.
So Pat, I think right now you're going to need all the information, putting out the job request. It's the county, who we are as a county, and then posting all the information about us. That's the first step. And then when we get to the second step about people responding to that, I also hope, we did have some interest locally too, so I'm hoping that perhaps they will apply. So then when we get to, we have candidates and all that, then that's the next step. How do we define and refine some of the qualities that Commissioner Gamble is talking about? So we have step 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, the actual hiring, so. Anything, so you're going to start tomorrow, right? April 12th?
Correct.
Okay.
With your approval, we will go ahead and we will post for a period of about 4 weeks, similar to what we did the first time. During those 4 weeks, I will send over questions and work with you to revise those and come up with something that the board is in full agreement on. So yes, that won't be a problem at all. And similar to last time, I will provide all those. I'll provide a sample, and then obviously the board, you can revise and make those specific to what you're looking for in Cook County, and I can certainly help with that as well. So.
Okay. So I think maybe when you have time, if you could just send out a new timeline, because we're kind of already to the top. The top part, the dates are a little bit off. So starting with April 12th, new timeline.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I will put together a new timeline and get that out to you in the next couple of days, so.
Okay. Commissioner White is taking notes here, but if we had a timeline on a piece of paper, it would help you out.
I didn't even write down.
Oh, dear.
I just wrote down starting tomorrow.
Okay,
So,
all right. Yes,
Just a point of clarification, Pat, are you able to post tomorrow, or are you not able to post until the 12th?
today's
You know what, we will go ahead and we will
Today's
post
the 8th.
tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to,
Okay,
on the 9th.
perfect,
pretty
thank
sure
you.
that we'll be able to go ahead and get it posted, yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair and Pat, did we have a list of the postings? In other words, do we know all of the places that we've posted?
Yes, that was sent out for the last one.
All right,
I will
thank
do, similar again.
All right.
And
Yes.
just to add to that, we take the posting that DDA does, and our public information coordinator, Todd Ford, will share it locally through our resources as
Okay.
well. So that'll happen too, and the board will be
That's
informed.
something I missed, I don't know.
Okay, anything else, Pat, that you need from us?
No, I think we're good to go, and I will continue to reach out to individuals and find leads, and again, if the board members have any individuals in mind that didn't apply in the first time, please reach out, encourage them to apply now. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks for your time.
You bet. Have a great meeting.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Anything else in updating?
Not for that item.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to Commissioner Report, meeting updates.
Did you want to do item B, the resolution?
I think we did that, right?
Oh, we skipped over, that's
No.
right. we-
I don't believe so.
No, we did not do the
What did
resolution.
we do?
We
while
talked
were-
about it, but we didn't.
Oh,
So, yeah, we voted. You mean on,
The resolution
PILT.
in
The
support
PILT
of
resolution?
Ty Blacknick.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
we haven't talked about it.
No.
That's why we
I
need
was
to.
thinking the bonding.
I don't think we're
Just
in
a small
disagreement
little
on this, if
background.
you want to get it done quick.
This came from the Arrowhead
Yeah.
Association meeting that we have with 8 counties. John Ungaro is our liaison between us and the legislature. And so we formed this together. And then the next day, it was like, hold on, just wait a minute. And that's why it didn't come up on March 25th. So now I'm asking for support now. And I'll go ahead and I will work with Jana on this paper, having the date and my signature, and send this off to Barb Caskey, who's our secretary. Is that agreeable? Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I had spoke with John, And he was, I think this past Monday, he was down there and they were testifying, and
You're right.
I think he just needs some support, so.
All the
with that,
support we can give.
I'd make a motion to support the resolution on behalf of Ty Blacknick Funds.
And I second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. If anyone has ever tuned into a committee meeting, it's really interesting. So I did. Last week, they have the elevator music first. Everybody's coming in, talking, getting their coffee, whatever. So Rowan, in the meantime, could we have a little music here while we're all getting our coffee and chit-chat?
Let's see if we can agree on what type of music it's going to be.
Well, it has to be, elevator music, soft and in the background. Commissioner Mills?
And just, I don't mean to be picky, this is for state PILT, not
State
federal.
PILT.
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
Right, yeah. Yep. Okay. Have I missed anything else up to commissioner concerns? I don't think so.
Just administrator
that's-
updates.
Administrator updates, yes.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, just to share, we talked about the basement remodel project, and our Facilities Director, Brooke Lassard, shared that in pulling a plumbing permit, there's a slight delay there, pushing it out about 30 days, so the new updated time of completion for that project and when we can move staff into that area is before the 4th of July. And so it pushed it out a little bit, and wanted to share that update with the board, and then just take the opportunity to thank all the staff who spent so much time going through records retention and all the other things that were in storage to make this possible. They pulled out literal truckloads of documentation and things from the basement to facilitate that, and it's something that, we need. We're in need of the space, and it's a good project. So I'm, again, thanking the staff for the commitment and the work done there. And then on to the law enforcement expansion project. We have a meeting, 2 meetings actually this week, on Thursday the 10th, and a early one in the morning where we've reached out to the city of Grand Marais. We're going to talk to them about sort of a pre-permitting meeting, as well as how the project relates to their climate action plan, to make sure we're all on the same page there moving forward with this project, as well as an afternoon meeting that will have to do with the grading and parking lots and interior options for the facility itself. A whole list of other meetings in between then and June, May 27th is still the targeted date for when we would come back to the board requesting to put the project out for bid. We've talked about this a couple different times about when a good time would be to bring the public in, kind of as a town hall or open house setting, to talk about the project one more time, where we're at with the project, what's the most up-to-date cost projections for this project, and to provide that public with an opportunity to do that. I've talked with BKV, and I've talked with Sheriff Eliason about this, and tentatively we're looking at Thursday, May 22nd, which would be when BKV will be here for an afternoon meeting anyway, the Thursday before the board meeting on May 27th, where we would be coming before the board asking to put it out for bid. So the thought being there that that's as close as we can get, where we'll have all those other meetings and as most up-to-date information we can about the project, and to set a public meeting, since BKV will already have been here, that they could stay into the evening and help us facilitate a public meeting where we would invite the public and they could come in and ask questions and see where the project is in terms of design and cost, and ask the questions of the stakeholders here from the county, as well as the subject matter experts that we've hired through the process.
Commissioner Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rowan, I think it would be important in that meeting that not to belabor and to overwhelm, but to give a context of how we got to where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And because there's been a number of proposals, and I think, what's hugely important in this is, I'll use the word balancing the identified need in law enforcement and the concerns of citizens relative to trying to be fiscally responsible. And so when we see that we've actively listened to all of those that have a vested interest in it, I think it's important to bring that out in the public meeting. This is what we did. We listened, we looked at it, and Pat, staff, whatever, commissioners, and so we see that, because building integrity and process substantively is huge, I think. And that to me, when we show, just like, with Brooke, with the YMCA, with Lutsen, these are things that are showing that the evidence of fiscal responsibility, paring things down, trying to do this, cutting this out, and says we're hearing. And I think that's hugely important to identify that on the front end as we go into the rest of it, so we aren't just assuming that everybody's going to, be comfortable with this without having context to see that this has not been easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, and I think, as mentioned, the right people will be there in the room to do that. And then with Rena Rogers stepping into this role and getting her up to speed on the project, that's very much in line with how she approaches that kind of communication, to talk about the purpose from the beginning and go through those things again that we've talked about. How did we get here? Why? Really the things we've talked about many times, but important in that, I agree, in that setting, to make sure that that's forefront, to talk about why we need a change in the Sally Port to accommodate the ambulances, why we need to have an appropriate place to process evidence, why we need an appropriate place for storing firearms and other things, and staff spacing, and all the other things that we've talked about before.
And the intention is to be authentic and not to be positioning as far as messaging. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
In other words, we're not figuring a strategy here. We just want it to be evident that the authentic process shows this influence in how we got to where we're at.
Anything else?
No, other than that, I just spent the last week with largely doing a transition with Rena Rogers, and I'd take the opportunity to thank her and the board and the staff and individuals from the community who have all reached out. It's been a really good experience for me, and I'm happy to move back to my MIS director role. But very grateful and thankful for the opportunity and the experience.
We are too.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on then to Commissioner Report meeting updates. Anybody have anything to offer?
I do.
Okay.
We need to give some recognition to Amanda Weiberg from Aquatic Invasives. Weiberg. She should have an E in there then. Amanda Weiberg, because she's with the Aquatic Invasive Species, and she, thanks to her squirreling away monies and when she got monies every year and didn't need to spend them all, and she was able to save them. She thinks she could save them. She didn't say they weren't spent, but she didn't ask anybody. So she has a pot of money that she can use to continue to function at full level this year, and maybe even next year, which also includes the hiring of the 4 boat landing people, and paying them more than any other inspectors in the state of Minnesota, which truly isn't much. But, so she did a fantastic job on that, which was, so Aquatic Invasive Species is well-funded going forward. So, and I do not know how she collaborates with Eileen.
Yeah. Soil and water.
Elena. Holy cow. Right, no neighbor. Anyway, and then, so there's that. When it comes to Well, actually, she can operate for 5 years, is what she said. If all of the funding disappears, she can keep going in that program, staffed as it is for the next 5 years. Way to go. So, there's that. Active living, safe routes to school. There is a thread that goes through all of these programs that a committee have been part of. Funding. The federal fundings channeled through the state, they are on hold, missing, withdrawn entirely. Highway Department also. So it's something to be really serious about. And I gave the sheriff a heads up and told him it wasn't personal. But I'm going to throw this out here in light of the economics of our coming forward with the tariffs and the chaos and the upheaval. Maybe we should not go forward with the law enforcement addition and everything this year. I know how much money we have invested. I know it will cost more later, but maybe, and this goes to Brady where I gave him a heads up the other day, maybe we can't afford to put that extra burden on our taxpayers if we don't need to. And no one has, as I have heard, Sheriff Eliason and other people, everyone agrees and is in favor of the upgrades for law enforcement for the safety of our community. And that also includes an emergency management area so we can be in place, all the equipment ready when we're needed, and instead of moving around and having to set up at the community center or wherever it might be. But I'm just throwing this out here that we need to think about our funding is really precarious at this moment in time. Maybe in a week it'll all be better, maybe in 5 months it'll be better, but right now I'm concerned about it, not only on a personal level and for the people that I know that live here, but for our entities that here, from school, everywhere, from our hospital. So there's that. The other thing, again, it came up with the active living. We have great concern, there is great concern that's been discussed about pedestrians and the Harbor View. And the fact that when the contractors were to get a permit, if I understood what Robbie has said now, they were to include plans for road access from that property onto the Gunflint Trail, and that shouldn't be a surprise at this moment not this moment in time, but there are not plans in place for managing pedestrians and truck traffic going up and down the trail, loaded with gravel or going up with logs. It hasn't been as thoroughly discussed, and there's not a solution at this moment in time. It's to be determined, and that's not the way it should be. So,
Anybody else have any meetings to report? Commissioner Gamble?
Madam Chair, just a couple of comments. One is you referenced Harbor View and it's Gunflint View.
Sorry.
Yeah, just for the public record, so we know in that regard. And then the other thing is, Madam Chair, if allowable, if Brady could just speak to the financing relative to the law enforcement center in combination with the transfer station and some of those things that we've talked about in committee. I think just to have a context with what we know right now and the concerns you're expressing on the financing right now, how that, just give us a little context for that, if that's okay, on short notice.
Yeah, well, we know the transfer station, we've already approved the fees structure for that, and those fees should cover that cost as we know them right now. And regarding law enforcement center, that doesn't have a specific fee. It's going to be a levy item. And we know that upcoming, we have potential funding through sales tax. When we end that 1% local sales tax, which I believe we're on track to do next February if we decided to. And the way the legislature wrote that, we'll continue to collect those sales taxes. And we've had that in our financial management plan to help with these bonding costs. And in fact, they looked previously, when we looked at it, they were to cover not only law enforcement, but subsequent bonding. Not forever, but these fees are available through 2030. So I think that gives us, since we don't have any other projects in the works for community center, public health, human services, the other things we've talked about, hopefully between now and when those other fees become available, we'll have a lot more clarity and can feel more comfortable doing it or not doing it, given what we'll learn between now and potentially those other project. The other project and the other are deferred maintenance, because we haven't finished that plan either. So both of those may depend somewhat on that sales tax. But of course, this is real speculation on the economy, given that we know it's kind of like the weather, and it, especially lately, it goes up and down and up and down. So getting real clarity on that, even by the end of the year, may not be easy, but we'll take it as it comes. But we're in I think, currently with what's coming up, even with changes, I feel like we're in a pretty strong position on the projects in the pipeline.
Commissioner Gamble?
Madam Chair, as a follow-up on that, thank you, Brady. And to Commissioner White's point, in your narrative, you said that, people see the need, whatever. It's just the financial concern at this point in time is a real financial concern. So there should be pause to help alleviate that meaningfully. So if it wouldn't be too much, Brady, to ask if we could look at the projections on revenue and the funding issue, which is the big issue. We're not saying the need hasn't been identified, it's just, can we afford to fund it right now? So that's why raising the question, the first point, if you could do a projection scenario that would show how the funding would be managed, which, based upon what you've said, is going to be largely the monies available to us through the sales tax. In representing that, if you show the high and you show the very lowest of what we've collected in sales tax, so we aren't projecting a high number, but we're projecting, a number that's reasonable relative to what we could anticipate for monies, and then any that would be over and above that would affect our levy. We want to see the effect on the levy relative to the financing of this. If that's something, if that's framed well enough to be understood, that you could present to us, that would help address some of the concerns.
Yeah, I would have to come up with, the high, the projected high and low. Well, yeah, you're going to have to make a decision. Okay, let's say the high is this and the low is 30%, 50%. What's the low? So it'll just get stated, and then you can look at it, see what that tells you, and then we don't know what the high and low is going to be, but yeah.
Isn't that
at
just
least
our
it'll be
financial
stated.
management plan?
It's in the financial management plan now. You've seen it. You've seen the projections in there.
And if it's something that I just not.
But things have changed. I mean, every time you look at one, it's changed.
Literally.
Our sales tax collections in 2024 were not what we thought. There was some drop towards the end, and then how do you project from that? So one answer is to update the financial management plan, but I could do a simpler one without engaging them.
I think it'd be beneficial if you're willing to
Yeah.
do it, just
Yeah.
to address, response to the concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other committee or meeting updates? Commissioner Sullivan?
Surely. Well, Rowan has already mentioned BKV and the work we did there. And Soil and Water met last Thursday. We talked again about funding and concerns about the reduction of federal funding, as well as state funding on programs. But the biggest question and concern I think that we discussed was the impact of the Army Corps' work with East Bay. And right now, we're just on a kind of a hold, a wait and see to see how that's going to move forward, or if it will at this time. But we do know that we definitely need that base stabilized. We need to have a study, and as far as work that will be done in the future, we'll have to see. I did want to comment on something outside of our work as commissioners. I had the privilege on Saturday night to go to the Violence Prevention Center fundraiser, and our former county attorney won the Joan Drury Award for her work to prevent and stop domestic violence and sexual violence. And I just really want to commend her for all the work that she's done. It's a really great honor. And then lastly, as we've talked about state PILT, and we know that all our northern counties are really concerned about that, I wanted to try something to go a little step further than just being part of this group. And so, Commissioner Starley, maybe you want to distribute. I wrote a letter that I thought we could send to the committees that are actually looking at the PILT bills to talk about what it means in particular to Cook County. The legislators get all kinds of emails, all kinds of information from groups, but I thought something specific from our county might be really helpful. And I want to thank Auditor Powers, Treasurer, for looking at my figures to make sure that they were accurate. But I really went back to the statute and what the intent is of PILT. And I really went back and included that in this letter because I felt that the 34% reduction that's proposed in PILT really undermines the purpose of that legislation a number of years ago, which was to compensate us for the loss of our tax base due to state-owned lands, to address the disproportionate impact on counties with high percentages of public land like Cook County, and to support the management of those state lands that's held in trust for local taxing districts. So this is a letter that I thought potentially could be sent on behalf of our board to members of the committees that will actually look at the PILT bills.
Great. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
We have a list, or how do you want to move forward with this? Do you want to?
I would think it would probably need to be something that would be approved by a motion and a vote. And then we could easily access the names of all the people that are on that committee, or on those committees, both in the Senate and the House, through talking with Senator Hoschild and Representative Scraba's aides.
Okay. It'll be sent to them then?
Correct.
And Jana would do that?
We could ask her to do that.
Okay.
Put it on county letterhead.
Right. Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for taking the initiative to do this. If my recommendation with, let's just say, the concert of voices that are advocating for this, and John Ongaro's significant role in this, if it would be acceptable, I recommend maybe that we would ask him if he'd review this, and if there's anything that could strengthen it in that concert of voices, given their representation before the legislature on this. So not that it becomes a form letter, because I think the uniqueness in our voice is hugely important. But I think we would benefit because of the context that he's been years on this and working with the individuals that have advocated. So my recommendation would be that we would send it to John and ask him to give his opinion, anything that might strengthen this, and then get that back and then move forward.
Okay, so I could do that then.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that'd be
Right.
appreciated if you're.
Sure. Absolutely.
My fear is that that's too late. This is like now.
Well, I think we could make a motion to approve it, subject to asking John just to review,
Sure.
you know.
I could send it this afternoon.
Yeah, just to, and if he is willing to, he says, man, I haven't got time for that, then we'll move forward. But I think we can benefit from, again, that collective voice that has that context.
Sure.
So make a motion that we would move forward, subject to any input that John and Garo might provide for us, and then
Right.
mail it.
Okay, so I'll hear a motion.
So moved.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
We need a second.
Hmm?
We need a
I
second.
think, oh,
No,
He made the motion.
I'll second.
all right, thanks.
Anyone can second. I don't care.
I think the force in which he made the motion was the first, second, and third myself.
So we have a motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner
Commissioner
Mills,
Mills.
second by Commissioner White. Got that?
Commissioner Gamble actually made the motion.
He's-
That's what I thought at first,
Yeah.
and
Then-
then I
Yeah.
didn't think
No.
that.
I would agree, and then I thought that Commissioner Mills had seconded, but.
Okay, I can run with that.
Okay, we'll give
Okay.
Commissioner Gamble the
Subject,
motion.
yeah, which I said, subject to
Subject
Anna
to-
Garo's
Got
review.
it.
And Commissioner White seconded.
No,
No,
No, did-
Gamble, Mills.
And Mills, okay. Oh, my, okay.
Thank you.
that was a hard one.
I guess I
Been
missed
sitting
the
here.
part about I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, we're clear on that. All
Must
in
be getting
favor?
late.
Aye.
Motion passes. Good, thank you. We got that too? Okay, any other meetings to
action there.
update? I'm going to just mention one thing briefly about the Importance of Leadership Workshop. This is a book that Commissioner Sullivan brought, and then we had our own workbook to work with. This fellow was excellent in leading us through each day about having a clear path in our leadership and being, how we communicate effectively and all that. One of the quotes that I took away from was that we try to allow others to see more by casting a vision. And I thought that was pretty profound. So I'm going to cast a vision. Just to think about this, no discussion now, but I think now that we're into April, we're going to start budgeting, and we're going to start looking at things, and we're going to need to have a lot of talk about that. But also, I think, besides that, we should start looking at our strategic planning. We have it laid before us, and we'll make sure that Commissioner Gamble has that. And then that could be done at a committee of the whole. Also, that we start looking at our policies. For example, the YouTube, how long do we keep that on our website? It's those types of things that we should start discussing one by one as we go along. No decisions now, but I'm casting a vision. Okay. Okay, anything else to update? Then we'll move on to, we have a lot of meetings coming up, Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Cook County Extension Committee, Cook County Grand Marais EDA, Housing Development, Highway Advisory, and so forth. So now we're going to recognize our staff. The April staff anniversaries are this. For 1 year, Lily Gruber Schultz in Public Health and Human Services. Michael Koenig in Recycle Center for 1 year. Dana Logan, Public Health and Human Services, 2 years. Jana Kochmiller, Burka, Administration for 2 years. Great. Diana Dimitrov, Attorney Office for 3 years. Matt Olson, Highway Department, 3 years. Kirk Oberg, MIS, 18 years. Thank you, everybody, and all of your anniversaries. And then we have milestones. So we have Daniel Berglund, Highway Department, 15 years. And this is really something. Bev Wokey, Auditor's Office, 20 years. Kurt Laboda, Highway Department, 20 years. And Steve Bunce, Highway Department, 30 years. Thank you all for your milestones and your anniversaries and all the great work that you do. And with no further business, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Sure, you read through it.